Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sunday morning special chat with today with Helen and Adam. Morning, guys.
Morning.
Welcome back to the usual Sunday morning. I always wonder, there's like quite a few people who regularly tune into this, or get messages if we don't start on time or something. Like I always wonder, what people do on Sunday mornings, and it's. They're tuning in, and I'm actually surprised with how many people watch us every Sunday morning or every Sunday throughout the day. It's pretty good, and today I hope it's gonna be no different with so much that happened in the politics, economy, everything.
Yeah, it's been
It's
quite a
been an
week.
eventful week, right?
I would say so. We've said goodbye to, I think, the best chancellor we've had for a whole number of years. I think I said a few weeks ago how angry I was when I heard George Osborne on the radio scoffing at the fact he had to learn economics on the job, which is obviously, ministerial posts can be a bit like that, but just shows you when you've got someone who understands a bit more about business and economics in charge, the difference can be massive. If Gideon had been presiding over the pandemic, I have just no idea what would have happened. So I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not a sort of traditional Tory voter particularly. I'm pretty apolitical, but I think Rishi did a decent job, all things considered. I wonder whether he will really be able to push on for the top job, because it seems that at the moment there's a bit of an undercurrent of he's the one who stabbed Boris in the back the most. He is, I think, near favourite now in the betting. I guess we'll see. It's the old, do you go for someone who's like Boris? And I mean, there is no one like Boris, obviously. I've never seen.
Unless people import Donald Trump from US.
Well, yeah, difference between the UK and the US, we actually managed to get rid of him before a full term. That's literally the difference, isn't it? But do you go for someone who's like Boris, who courts the sort of same level of support, or do you go for someone more traditionally conservative? I mean, the question I've had levelled at me several times this week is, what would you do if you were Chancellor? And it does make you think that ultimately Chancellor is only one person. And some of the problems that we've got need cooperation from the Bank of England, need cooperations from other government departments. Energy is a particularly topical one at the moment, obviously, but productivity, no one sort of comes out and talks about productivity, and that the only silver bullet that there is to really save the economy is productivity. And I've not heard a single politician utter a single word about what they'll do for productivity. So that is concerning. And, we've not been making great strides in that department since 2008. And that's why we had a pretty limp last decade. The most meaningful bit of economic growth we've had has been through massive government stimulus. And it brings you back to that old never waste a good crisis saying in politics, and they didn't really, although I do feel they could have raised more debt when money was effectively free, and done more with it to rebuild after the pandemic. Again, I didn't hear a single, I know I take boring economic methodical approaches to things, but I didn't hear a single person say, do you know what, we've studied past pandemics and this is what we've come up with, because we know what challenges we might face over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And of course, that's the nature of politics. Nobody thinks in those lengths of time. And that's why we end up having the problems that we do. We already had sort of 2 years to an election. Now we've got a load of flux right now. No one's really sure how long this process is going to take. Was there 16 people's hat in the ring, is there, at the moment?
Wow.
The vultures have descended on the dead carcass of the blonde-haired buffoon, and let's see what happens. But it's not going to be good for the country per se. So you have that kind of, what did Labour have last time out? They got their backsides handed to them, and they thought the message was, we need to go for someone different. So we move away from the sort of further left Corbyn style methodology back towards the centre, which is the only way they're going to win. And I mean, the Corbyn result shows you just how much of the country is behind that sort of thinking and ideology in general, about 30% really. I don't know that will change massively over the coming years, but it's a long way away from getting elected. So they go back towards the centre. So, you know, the Conservatives have done well because Boris has been clever at taking all of that ground from the left of centre onwards and occupying it. But I think they need something relatively different. I'm still surprised how many Boris loyalists there are out there who are sort of saying, well, he was cheated, he was this, he was that. It's like, mate, he's one of the biggest liars of modern times. You know, he's just, it had to happen. And it was a fascinating, I was watching the betting markets throughout as it was unfolding. And I was just thinking, oh, I mean, he's gone. He is gone. And you could still get on, was it Monday night? It all kicked off. And on Tuesday morning, you could still get 18% return on your money if you bet him to leave in 2022.
Wow.
Can you believe? And that is testament to his alligator blood, because that was when only Javid and Sunak had gone before and then a few people you hadn't really heard of, and then the dominoes sort of really started to come and things shortened up again. But you know, they still weren't sure he'd be gone. They still weren't sure he'd be gone. You know, and that resignation speech didn't, you know, missed a few things out, didn't it? Like, yeah, maybe I did a couple of things a little bit wrong. Maybe none of that. Never gonna happen. So on to the after dinner speaking circuit. It is, I guess, for the big man.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Maybe you'll be able to do less damage there, but no, maybe not. I'd still watch out if I was a woman at one of those parties.
Don't have the best reputation, do they?
Wow. Well, it's not better in Germany, because I saw an article saying that this like a ruling party conference, apparently like up to 10 women were actually drugged, and it was like the party with the Gerhard Schroeder and all the like top people in the party, and like, yeah, it was not better.
Jeez.
I suppose the biggest thing the Conservative Party have done for sexual equality so far is made sure they've got senior politicians abusing as many men as they do women at the moment, which is hardly progress, is it? You know, but the old pincher by name, pincher by nature was not an ideal analogy. I did think of Jay actually when I heard that, and thought I think Jay would have enjoyed that analogy. He would have.
I'm afraid.
Well, that's why I thought. Well, I wondered what Jay was going to make of your reverse ferret this morning. I'm like, oh, Jay, missed an amazing opportunity there.
It might be worth just dwelling on the reverse ferret for a moment for people who haven't read the supplement yet. I've taken a sort of a step back and a very macro view of everything that's going on at the moment, and I can't make sense of what's going on in various markets at the moment, but I'm long enough in the tooth to know A, I definitely don't know everything, and B, you know, the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. So, and C, of course, it's all, you know, probabilities and things that can work out. But I read it this week. It wasn't Kelvin Mackenzie, but it was one of the other fairly legendary editors of the News of the World who used to cry. He used to, when a big story broke, he would shout, "Ferret," as in move like there's a ferret running up your trousers. And then as that story started to play out, it proved not to be true. Then he would shout, "Reverse ferret," and everybody had to go back to what they were doing before they dropped everything, you know. And that's very much the way that the markets have been behaving over the last sort of week or 10 days, where they've kind of said, yeah, actually, interest rates are going to have to come back down. Yeah, actually, this inflation is transitory, and this is all sorting itself out. You know, OPEC have said they're releasing more supply earlier on than they said they were going to. You know, there's a whole amount for people who, and I have no sort of detailed understanding of oil, but what I do know is in geopolitics, generally your enemy's enemy is your friend. And it's a bit more complex than that when it comes to oil, because ultimately rightly or wrongly, the Western world has a big ally in Saudi Arabia. But then the Saudis and the Russians have a certain understanding, let's say, which complicates things when the Russians invade another sovereign nation, obviously. So there hasn't been the sort of help that the US and the UK might have wanted being forthcoming from the other big dogs of world oil, the biggest producers in the world. And then, of course, you could say, well, the US specifically hasn't done the best work in furthering good relations with countries that have lots of oil in the past ever. So there is also that to take into account. But the oil price has come a fair bit off the top. The gas price has come right down from what was a high, but you know, the nature of things. The fact that Putin could do anything in winter time, it's all a bit scary, isn't it? Really, to be honest, it's all a bit scary, and it's got me feeling relatively bearish about what's going to go on. Although I think it's probably worth saying, in terms of how it's affecting my business strategy, definitely cashing up a bit and making sure Pretty Liquid got a good war chest going into the winter, but still buying, still seeing opportunities, and expecting on the back of this more opportunities, realistically. And as for the rental market is still, it's starting to beg a belief what rents are being achieved with no batting. You know, I wrote today about how a lot of large corporates are sort of quietly reporting that they can nearly do what they want with their pricing at the moment. But it's not dissimilar in the rental market. You know, it's insane. It's absolutely quite hot.
That example, didn't you give an example last week that just of something that was on the market and went just for ridiculous amounts over?
Yeah, best and finals, and it went for 50% over what the ask was. And the ask,
wow,
you know, 2 years ago, that ask would have been considered insane on its own, and it went 50% above. I mean, look, one example is obviously anecdotal, but still, it speaks volumes about where the reality is 255,000 fewer homes available in the PRS since 5 years ago. So, you know, forget pandemics, forget all of that stuff. That direction of travel has pushed landlords away from the market, and the net effect is lower amounts of stock. And that on its own causes a problem. But of course, that's not operating on its own at the moment. It's operating in the post-pandemic world, where we've got lower supply because properties weren't bought, they weren't refurbished, they weren't built to rent. All that gap in the supply chain, you know, it has the same effect. But you can't bring rental stock online like that. It's not the case of an inventory and a just in time and everything else. The government have pushed people away for 7 years, and they're still pushing people away. You know, we've got a lack of guidance over EPC grades and things like that, and where they're going to want us to be. We've still just got consultations to get on. And, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go, well, do you know what? I was hoping to hold on for a bit, but I've had a good run. The market is fantastic at the moment for selling houses. We'll just sell some houses. Perfect. And either you might go from being a leveraged landlord and pay down all your debt because you're worried about where the interest rates are going to, or you're just cashing in a bit earlier than expected. Of course, the problem is, what do you then do with the money? If you're going to spend it, it's no particular issue. But if you want to invest it, you've got a different conundrum to deal with at this point. And that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? A whole other can of ferrets, really, when you think about it.
Well, you touched on the bond yields and where they are, where they've been up to, and where they're around now, and so exactly where do you put it otherwise?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? When you've got the crazy perverse nature of, there's people who've been sitting for years waiting for 3 and 3.5% bond yields, but they're no bloody good when inflation is 8, 9, 10. You know, it's massive wealth destruction stuff, really. And if you, depending on just quite how conspiracy theory you want to go, ultimately, when people go on about these big rants about the world's controlled by the Rothschilds and all the bloody rest of it, if it was, then they would be sorting the inflation problem out sooner rather than later, wouldn't they? Because it's their wealth that's getting eroded in these circumstances. Because some of the stuff that's traditionally protected returns and all the way through to pension funds and all the rest of it for years is private equity. And private equity's been built on the back of cheap credit, right? The best private equity deals go out, they find a great company that's got no debt, right? They load it up with debt. It makes sense because the debt is tax deductible, right? And they increase the return on equity because mathematically that's just what happens, right? It's arbitrage, private equity, but it's arbitrage when interest rates are, 2-3% easy enough for them to raise money. When interest rates are 5-6%, mathematically the same problem the reverse ferret comes into play, doesn't it? It's just not the same as it was. And then what does that mean? As I've been saying over the last few weeks, then ultimately price of debt goes up. There's only the same amount of returns in the pot. Comes back to how do we solve the productivity puzzle? And how many people, why is there not a minister for productivity and a whole bloody government department devoted to it? Because there absolutely should be, and anyone with a remote understanding of economics would be able to tell you that. But still, no, we just don't talk about it because it's quite an awkward conversation. It makes you struggle because it sounds like you're asking people to work harder, for example, and it's not the point. It's not the point of the puzzle.
I think this week when I was listening to some other podcasts, like there was a quote that it stuck to me, and like when I was reading your post this morning, Adam, I was like, wow, this is not eye-opening, but like adding to that to this quote, because the quote was saying that history, like people think that history repeats itself, but it doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes with the previous things, and like you don't get exactly same things, but the sounds are very similar. And basically, when I was in the article, it was like those pieces that like what happened before, and it doesn't mean that the same thing is going to happen now, but similar things are like on its way. And because they come from like different assumptions, like now the inflation is X and the interest rates were like so low as never before, like so there will be slightly different things, but they will rhyme with what was before and how things happened before.
Well, if you go back to the very beginning of 2022 feels like it's gone very quickly, but it also feels quite elongated in terms of what's been going on and where things have changed week to week. The first business week of 2022, companies issued more bonds, more corporate bonds than they ever had, which meant there were enough clever CFOs, right, who said, I think this interest rate thing is over pretty soon. Let's get some money in, right, for as long as we can and make as much of that as I say to people all the time, you'd be stunned where people will work 20, 30, 40 years, build up a business or a property portfolio or whatever, right? And then it comes to the crunch when they come to sell it and they can lose half of the money that they could otherwise get. Quite often it's in tax, right? Quite often. But it can be in just inefficient disposal or presentation of what you're selling. And it's just, to me, it beggars belief. But because of the way that capitalism and the Western world works and all the rest of it, what it really means is the thing you should do is specialize in transfer pricing and asset disposals and asset acquisition, because that's where the big money is, and that's when it comes to the crunch in some of these deals. Yeah, exactly. And that ultimately, let's face it, that's what we do. That is what we do on the back of that. So it makes sense to do that. But it never ceases to amaze me how that happens.
Yeah.
It's the importance of structuring it and thinking about where you're heading. I know you have with your and Rod's boardroom club. That's kind of one aspect of it that you help people, and I've recommended people to it because they're at that point where they want to scale up, and it's like, actually, if you get your ducks in the line now, it will help you going forward, such that whilst you're building the business, you're not also building problems for yourself to have to solve later on. Try and think about them and plan for them now. And, it's not, there's always going to be things that happen. But if you can start thinking about how you structure those things now before you ramp up,
Well,
yeah.
I always think about it like, you're aware of the Peter principle, which says, you get promoted to your level of incompetence within an organization, which obviously it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but I know we will have all come across people who are overemployed for their skill set, right? We've all known them, and it's not uncommon. And often, of course, part of the other problem is people get promoted because of their political skills within an organization, not because of what they can do. So I can see that's resonating reasonably well with Ellen. But the same goes for business. I think it's not just about people and organisations. If you pick on a letting agency, you grow to the size of your competency. Yeah, you get to a stage. It might be the average letting agency in the UK only manages about 120 units, right? Which might be quite a bit lower than most people would think.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of one-person operators who pay the rents once a month, 3 days locked up in a dark room. They do everything. They do the compliance, they do the advertising, they do the viewings, they do the whole lot. And they're self-employed is what they are. It's not a business because they can't come out of that business. And that's ultimately reflective of their competence. And on the flip side, it means that if you can sort of see these things coming, like you do with, I've always thought about operations strategy as very, very important when you're trying to scale up, because ultimately you're trying to forecast where those blockers are in the future and then take them out before they become a problem. So it's like, for example, sitting back and thinking at the moment, I'm thinking, right, if this mortgage or this suite of mortgages drops off in January 2023 or July 2023, is that going to put those properties in a particularly difficult position? Well, actually, 80-90% of the time, the insurance of a fixed rate is quite bad value, I would say. But at the moment, we're in a rare time where we're in that 10 to 20% of the time where it offers exceptional value, and not in terms of, I'm cautious of like trying to predict exactly where the rate will be, right? What I'm doing is insulating from the upside, because the upside risk is significant. And the difference between 4% and 5% is not the same as the difference between 5% and 6%, right? Yeah. That marginal ceiling that exists at around 6.5% debt, unless you're carrying 30-20% loans of value, but you're probably not gearing up, so your returns on equity will be suppressed in the same way that the private equity returns on equity will be suppressed by the higher cost of debt. It's the same mathematics, So it's super important for people to understand it, and that's just one facet of. Does that mean it isn't time to try and grow a property portfolio or a development? Absolutely not. There'll probably be some of the best opportunities you'll see for a generation over the next couple of years, right? Even if things don't go too badly, there'll be 10 or 20% of people in the marketplace who think they are going to go very badly. I learned this around Brexit time, especially in Scotland, because obviously they voted quite heavily to remain, and vote went against them. And there were some really bearish people who were selling properties, they just made their mind up. There was no flexibility. There was no, well, this might happen, this might happen, this might happen. And today there'll still be people going, well, now we've got another indie ref penciled in. Well, that's it. Get out of Scotland as quickly as you can. Well, absolutely, because Scotland's just going to close its doors. I mean, obviously it's not. In fact, there's some quite interesting economic implications of what will happen if Scotland does leave the United Kingdom. Not all of which will be bad for what will become not overseas investors, but foreign investors, I guess, like me. I mean, it's a conundrum, and of course, there's multiple things that will play out, and there's still all those questions to answer like they were last time. What will happen with the currency? What will happen with this? What will happen with that? What will happen with their share of the national debt? What will happen with? I mean, from an from an economic and political perspective, it's an absolute nightmare. And and like Brexit, rightly or wrongly, solely from the economic perspective, it's a value destruction process. The question becomes: is the political advantage worth paying the price for the economic value destruction? And obviously, the United Kingdom decided 52-48 that it was in 2016. What will Scotland decide in 2023? Don't know.
Ooh, we could just do a little soundbite from Ross there. Over to Ross.
The thing that I've always heard from people who are in business in Scotland as pretty much very uniform in that they just think it will wreck the economy. And the problem is belief can be a lot of the problem here, in the same way that it can be with inflation and recession. That's why the central bank spends so much time politically generating their statements, because they know what sort of effect they will have. The start will be painful if that's what happens, that's for sure. But the ultimate result, who knows? What I would forecast is, if it does happen, the SNP won't be in power for the next 10 years in Scotland. They'll be voted out. They'll be voted out relatively quickly, because I don't see them managing the process particularly well, because they're led by ideology. They're not being led by, I think there are mechanisms by which they can get it done. And I doubt they'll follow one of those optimal mechanisms. It'll be more about courting votes. And then you've got to throw back in the EU membership, because they've got that quite difficult, around about half of their supporters don't want to be in the EU. So if the Stay Together or the Remain campaign or whatever are clever, they'll just focus solely on, okay, well, enjoy your membership of the EU then, guys, and all the rest of it, and we'll see what happens.
That would be really interesting. But like, from the business perspective, like what view do you take on things when there's a significant risk of Scotland going out of like the UK, and also this affecting businesses? Like, I know it creates opportunities, but isn't it like wise to actually assume that this is a massive risk, and then like people don't usually kind of go into such a depth of analysis as your posts, and they usually just go for a simple option, right?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you've got to think about, it depends what you're involved in, doesn't it? If you're going to pick up a development site that might take 3 years to bring to market, I might be thinking twice about whether I'd do that in Scotland right now. If you're talking about ongoing businesses that you've got, remember, we're at the unsexy end of the scale. We're in property, we're in rental property because people need homes. Is there going to be a massive flight out of Scotland if they go independent? No, there's probably be a smallish flight of very wealthy people who think, well, sod this for a game of soldiers. I'm not playing this game anymore, and I don't like the flavour of the SNP and how they think. One of the potential implications, and this all hinges in the balance with the EU thing, but I would expect a more liberal immigration policy, right? And that will mean businesses wanting to relocate to Scotland because they can get some of the labour they can't get in England. It's going to have a unique geographical ability to move goods over the border, however that's, when Hadrian's Wall is rebuilt, or however the hell that's going to work if it happens. There'll be quite a lot to like about it. And if they did rejoin the EU, I think they'd be under a huge amount of pressure to join Schengen as well, which would be really interesting. But ultimately, for landlords, I don't think that is a bad thing, right? I think it's probably quite a good thing. So I'm cautious of, we'd need to see plans be laid out, and if last time's anything to go by, they won't be. But I'm sure they will have learned a lesson about the people who will, what was Brexit really determined by? About 3 million people in the middle. So about 7 or 8% of the voting population, realistically. So that swing vote is incredibly important. I think those people who obviously, because they can go left or right or stay or leave, by definition, they're in the centre politically, and they're probably making relatively sensible decisions based on the information they've got in front of them. And I don't, whilst there's a lot of political charge in nationalistic, sod the English, or we want to stay together, we're British, we're not Scottish primarily, those are the two ends of the spectrum. There will be a lot of people who think, well, hold on, I don't want unemployment, I don't want this to happen, I don't want that to happen, I don't want my business to suffer. And then, as I also said, I don't want to rejoin the European Union. Or if we do, ultimately, it's a bare point of fact that Scotland on its own negotiating with the EU will not be like the UK negotiating with the EU, right? The EU would love to have them back to prove it cements that, well, if you do leave, it might break up your country and then someone might come back. They would absolutely love that. But they're not going to roll out the red carpet for it. They're going to get every pound of flesh that they want from Scotland if that's the route they're going to go down. So yeah, I guess it depends on what you're buying.
Got it. Yeah. So if it's income producing, if it relies on good foundations, then it doesn't really matter that much. But if it's risky and the outcome of the project depends on some future things, then that's problematic. Yeah.
Got it. And if it's expensive, or if it's serviced accommodation, depending on what it is, if it's holiday stuff, is Scotland leaving the UK going to affect how many people want to go to Inverness every year? I don't see why it would. I don't see why it would. I don't think there's going to be any hard feelings for them, the man or woman on the street. Realistically, if they want to do that, then I hope it adds value for. I doubt it will, but I hope it adds value for them. So you're probably okay with that sort of stuff, because there's a lot of international business in. Scotland offers something that England doesn't and Wales doesn't it, really, when it comes to geography, when it comes to whiskey, when it comes to all these other things. So, the tourist trade should be pretty robust. If you're doing high-end executive detached homes that will appeal to the top 1%, I'd be a little bit concerned about that right now in Scotland, for sure. For sure.
So with all this going on, Helen, how did you kind of approach assessing deals at your London Investors Show?
Well, actually, a couple of the pitches, that's what we picked up a lot about time frame. And I would say, and I think we all thought, which is not uncommon, this won't come as a great surprise, the time frames noted were optimistic, should we say. And I think people, can generally understand. There was one guy who runs a construction company, obviously had a really good handle on numbers and kind of costs, material costs and stuff, and how long it would take to deliver a project. And that's great, but that's only one aspect. If your exit then is to sell these things, how long is a piece of string? Like, to budget your 3 months on the end, well, good luck, because you're going to need to either sell them before you've finished. And again, I've seen that being done very, very well. And I've seen people try it, and when they've not put the resources, the design, the CGIs and that, and then I've seen people fail miserably. So you either need to sell it, kind of on day one, and hope everybody, all the sales go through, and you've got a really good solicitor who's not backed up with all of the stuff that can move that process along. Well, that is a lot of things that need aligning to get all those. And, if we're talking multiple units, you have risk. Every one of them is an individual risk, right? That's not like, oh, well, if one goes well, they'll all go well. Yeah. Good luck with that. So, when I say, oh, we'll have them sold in 3 months, Yeah, rose tinted glasses. Woo, woo, woo.
Well, you can't take the last sort of 18 months performance in the market and how long it's taken to sell stuff as what's going on going forward, can you? I've done a piece in Property Investor News this month about, as the market starts to cool or whatever. And what's interesting is in the data, which is real-time Rightmove data, so I would argue is as good at being in the now as anything. There's no particular sign outside of the city centres, which always behave quite anomalously anyway. Like Birmingham city centre, for example, is doing much better than it was 9 months ago. Manchester city centre is doing much worse than it was. But at the time, Manchester was massively outperforming Birmingham.
Yeah.
And they've come but there's a huge amount of supply gone onto the market in Manchester in the interim. And that often happens because, as Helen was saying there, the individual units are independent of each other, largely speaking. And the same goes for big developments. Someone might be doing a massive development. There might be 5 other big development companies that are doing another 800 units each. And if they come online around the same time, and this is part of the problem that developers have at any size, really. I mean, obviously smaller, you can do 3 houses, you can do a nice job. You probably put a finish in there that none of the bigger house builders are anywhere near delivering.
Yeah.
And that sort of insulates you a little bit. But the bigger the sites get, the more of the problems you can have. And we're not yet seeing, what we're seeing is a little bit more time being taken, but we're not seeing big differentials in the amount of stock that's available yet. So there was this nonsense headline about a flood of properties hitting Rightmove, and it's one of those classics where they've just gone, right, let's cherry pick the point where there was the least stock available over the last 2 years, and then say how many more properties there are than that low point. It's just utterly false. There's I've been doing and that's why I put in the post today about the supplement, looking for a researcher so I can actually keep more of an eye on these things and push some of these numbers out more regularly to people, because we can wax lyrical about things left, right and centre, but the numbers are the numbers. And if you put an auction catalogue together and you sell 90% of it, it was well priced and it was all good. If you sell 40% of it, it wasn't. So there's not get fixated on 1 or 2 headlines or 1 or 2 pieces of guff that get us to click on a few things.
That's right. Yeah.
Sorry. What are you looking for in your researcher, Adam? I saw Quasi put his hand up for this job.
It's slightly overqualified, isn't he? Really, to be honest. It would be amazing. So I'm looking at someone who can pull together some of that primary source data, like things that come out of Rightmove, and also some of the macro pieces that come out of the Office of National Statistics and all the rest of it, and just collate it and save me a bit of time from doing it. And some of that stuff I don't have time to do in a week. So I know what to do. I know what I'd like to see, and I know why I think it would be important to everybody. I simply don't have the capacity to do it. So that's the plan. So not a hugely onerous task by any stretch of the imagination. I've had a few applications through message this morning, so that's been lovely to deal with as well. So we're on the road in the hunt, Helen.
Nice. That'll be a good opportunity for someone to really kind of dig into things and know where to look for information, and I guess also what kind of information to look for, because there's lots of data to go through, and the important thing is where to look for and what to look for.
This is it, and what the media drives us towards in order to get us to click or whatever they do is almost by definition incorrect. So it's just that sort of cut through the noise.
Yeah,
stuff.
It's the interpretation and the context. Like, how do you contextualize that? Like, if you're coming from a ridiculously, unrealistic low base, then you can create those headlines. But does that have practical implications? Can you extrapolate anything else about the bigger market, the bigger economy? Not in this case, probably.
Well, and it's that I've tried to do a bit of that today, where I've taken a position at the moment, and I've always said I hate people who say there's going to be a recession, I've taken a position that there's going to be a recession. That's a very broad brush statement. I think it's a near guarantee. Does it mean it will damage anything particularly? Not necessarily. So there's still lots to work through. But I've tried to steel man the other side of the argument and say, look, employment is so strong. The US released some figures this week. They put on 372,000 jobs in June, right? That's big. In the US, in a good month, would probably put on 180,000, something like that. So still over double that. And they've got an even, we're something like about 1.1 vacancies to every person at the moment. The US are like 2.2 vacancies to every person. So they mathematically can't fill all the jobs. And of course, they've got their own political pressures on immigration and all the rest of it that are stopping them from just sucking people in. But of course, even in the Eurozone, which has traditionally had higher unemployment than these sort of very postmodern industrial economies, they're at a record low unemployment. They went below 6% across the whole of Europe. So there are jobs everywhere at the moment, realistically. And of course, that will be lower in Germany and higher in certain parts of the Eurozone. But still, where are the people? Where are the people? And this is, I think this is why China, some time back, have got rid of their one-child policy, because they've realised the shape of their demographics at some point is going to cause them a gigantic problem. And the problem is this is one of the benefits of the one-party state. They do look 30 years in the future. This is. I'm not advocating for a communist regime, to be clear, but there are benefits in the benevolent dictator. Rod often talks about the benevolent dictator. He likes the idea. I think the problem becomes the people who tend to gravitate into those positions are not logical thinking, middle of the road, everybody's best interests at heart. It's the old, we're all equal, but some of us are more equal than others approach. And if you think the Conservative Party politicians are bad at abuse, then have a look at what some of the Chinese have been up to. You know what I mean? So I shouldn't say more. I'll probably get shot for saying things like that. So maybe I'll just keep that to myself.
Oh, we'll cut it from there.
It's the problem with live broadcasting, Piotr, isn't it? Really?
Oh, no, I'm pretty sure this broadcast doesn't reach as far as China, but yeah.
Thank goodness.
Great stuff. We got one comment from Guy saying that journalists never were bothered to getting in the way of a good story.
Ain't that the truth, Guy? Ain't that the truth? Be interested to hear what Guy's seeing on the auction front as well at the moment, because what have you seen over the last sort of couple of weeks, Piotr? Are you picking up any particularly different signals? Or I'm seeing it very sort of up and down, really, to be honest, which I think is generally how it goes, isn't it? Normally.
Yeah, I'm just been some really good auctions, and there's also been some auctions that kind of seemed a little like they struggled, but still generated okay results. But I think it seems like with auctions, with this, it's like there's a natural flux, and like 1 month can be really good, and the other month can be like just slower, and it's hard to kind of predict things based on like 1 or 2 auctions, or even like a particular week, because a particular week might be difficult, but then the next week can be crazy. So I would say there's nothing like that I see that's like kind of would paint the future.
So I think that in itself is really valuable information, because the absence of a clear pattern is in itself, because people forget, not much trades at auction, 25,000, 30,000 lots a year. It's not big in the context of a property market where 1 million, 1.2 million properties change hands, So the fact that the absence of a pattern is a pattern in itself, because it just means there's that natural volatility between auctions which only have 30 lots, 50 lots, 80 lots. And as you say, I'm sure there's a lot of science that goes into which week of the month or which week of each month you try and put your sales in. But one of the big changes since the lockdown has been SDL just doing their, last Thursday of the month, that's it. That's when we have our auction. So they just sort of, and for them it sort of helps. They build they have their time building the book, they have their time dealing with the after sales, they have their day to, or their 2 days with the commercial to deliver the auction, you know.
And even picking the day of the auction in the week is like quite an important thing. So speaking of one auction, and that auction is on Tuesday, and they're so stressed because like they have to handle everything, all the registrations, kind of like it was on Friday. Then Monday you come back and people would still be registering over the weekend.
Yeah.
But now like you have to handle all that plus all the other things that come up before the auction. And then auctions on Tuesday, and it's like a really super tight time to deal with everything. So
I've not really thought about this before, but a friend of mine used to work in machine gaming table placement strategy, right? So as stupid as it sounded, you could orient a blackjack table or a roulette table 45 degrees in a different direction, and the take would go through the roof or it would drop through the floor.
Whoa.
So whether that's sort of feng shui, whether that's what it is, because you're going into the unconscious mind to try and elicit behavior, and that's the level at which. So there's probably a job in there somewhere for an auction house for a time and date specialist. Maybe that can be something that. So maybe Hamad can add that to their portfolio services.
Maybe we'll be saying to clients, we can't offer this property because the auction is on Tuesday too early. We should be placing this on Thursdays after 12.
Yeah. It'd be interesting if the data. I bet the data would be surprising if you got a large enough sample size. Look at it that way. So whenever the human subconscious is involved, then all sorts can happen.
Interesting. I'll be looking out now for auctions that happen on Monday, because that's quite an insane thing to do an auction on Monday with all the registrations. So I think that's a good place to pick up deals.
In the good old days before things went online and everything, there was an auction I used to go to that was on a Monday night. You couldn't phone bid and you couldn't online bid. You had to turn up to the room. Oh, mate. And the reserve was always the guide. And decent auction. There was only about 8 lots, but my goodness me. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
Interesting. Guys put another comment saying we're seeing more selling inquiries and some are showing concern about media concern the change in the market. Network auctions with sales on Thursdays. Yay.
Yeah,
that's why we use network auctions. EAG have a date of dates, and we are less interested in classing now. We're online.
I mean, that all makes loads of sense, doesn't it? You've got Friday to sweep up afterwards as well. Thursday probably the best day of the week. Makes loads of sense. Yeah. And it makes sense about the media. More sellers worrying about media concern because they know it's the spiral of frenzy, isn't it? Really, that's the thing.
It's true. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see over the next few weeks how things are gonna affect property and how people kind of perceive things. Because over the last few years, there's been like some of the best deals were done throughout these uncertain times, right? When there was election or there was other things going on, or the Brexit vote and all those kind of times of uncertainty where people were not sure, like you said, like there's no clear direction where things were heading. And because of that, people were able to pick up good deals.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because normally, and obviously there'll be an organic slowdown as we get into the summer because people go away. So how much of that will then be jumped on by the media as, there's much less going on in the market? It's like, like every normal year but then of course there won't be as many people going on. I can't remember how many flights BA cancelled the other day, but it was tens of thousands, wasn't it?
Yeah.
30,000, yeah.
20,000.
So, that's presumably flights that people would quite like to have been on to go to places. So how much the holiday effect will actually bite this year will also be quite interesting. And you don't see loads of auctions in August normally, do you? Certainly in the meat of the month. But again, some of my best results have been nice mid-August auction. So one auction house thinks, Birmingham don't have an auction in August, so we might as well have one. And that makes sense because there's still disposals to do. There's still the corporate clients that want to get rid of stuff. But the results could be quite interesting. We bought some good deals from those sorts of auctions. Be interested to see how much the summer effect plays out or not.
Yeah, it's true. Well, this year, I mean, and also last year there was quite a few auctions in August, and even the big ones are now in August. Like we picked up a deal in Savills auction. That was the 4th of August auction, and now also Residential's got an August auction House London. A lot of, not a lot, but quite serious players have got a London August auction. Previously used to be just Harman Healy.
I guess the thinking as well is, as Guy was saying in his comment there, in terms of online bidding and things like that, crossovers don't matter anymore. But also, even if you are on holiday, you can still bid on your phone. You know, the smartphone has changed. The smartphone plus lockdown has changed all of that quite a bit. So maybe those seasonal effects that I've loved so much for so many years will dissipate. Maybe in August anyway, maybe not so much in December, because people, I think, still tend to just switch off a bit, really. There's a human nature in the cyclical part of the year there.
Guys are saying
there we go.
December auction is one of the best, one of the best auction in the year. Yeah.
Right, why bother with network auctions in December then, Guy? Thank you.
Nice one. We should invite Guy to join our conversations on Sunday.
That'd be good.
It seems like he's a regular listener to our chats. It would be good to get a take of an auction.
Yeah, we had a few good guests and things over the years, didn't we? We should think about bringing that back for sure.
I know some of them come and never leave.
But they add value.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a comment from Mark. Problems everyone thinks the same, like you can pick up good deals in August, meaning more competition expected. Well, that's the thing. I think it all depends on the deals, right? Because like there will be some things where people just cannot be bothered to uncover problems, or go through things that just require a little bit more effort. And I would really be interested as well in the research that kind of shows the temperature and the weather and how this affects some deals and stuff. Because if it's a hot weather, like, can you be bothered checking out or chasing tenants or seeing whatever information is missing? Like, no, people would just go for straightforward deals, and that's where the opportunities happen. So I think the opportunities are really in the auction on the things where everyone else has put off basically they got put off by something that's difficult to overcome, and you know how to do it. And that's why you come in a place of no competition or little competition, and you snap up those deals.
It's a really good point, actually. I used to go to when I lived in London, Locks Road auctions when I had the big house, and I was kind of doing that up and furnishing that. And if it was you had to go down and kind of bid in person. And if it was a nice weekend, I went every week, but I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a great day. I cleaned up. I got a baby grand piano once for 200 quid because we had freak glorious weather in like a March day, and there was no bugger at this auction. It was awesome.
Nice. Well, that's why, like, in our auction buyers club, like, we see that there could be a month where no one does a deal, and then there could be the next month where like 6 people do a deal, and it's like it just goes in waves, and usually that things happen like because you like regularly in the market and watching things. So
I think you've nailed that though, Piotr. The difficult lots are even better in those quieter months because people don't do their. I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I think this has been another interesting chat. And I can see from comments.
I think you've got to pick your next leader of the Conservative Party though before we go. Come on, it's got to be done. Who's going first?
Dominic Raab.
Ooh.
I just want another claim to fame, right?
Yeah. I'd like Rishi Sunak, but I don't know if he's got much of a chance considering everything else going on. But yeah, I'll go for Rishi.
I'll choose someone different then, although I would like it to be Rishi, but I'll say I think Tom Tugendhat is a straight talking person who would do the country some good. So he seems reasonably warm in the betting. That normally there's a lot of inside money going in on stuff like this. So double T for me then.
Double T. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, it's when what is the timeline of the elections?
Well, it's not clear yet. So they're saying like there's always the same chat. Or we could wrap it up in a couple of weeks. So with 16 candidates, I can't see that happening. To be honest, it's ballot and ballot and ballot and ballot, and then it goes out to the all the members of the party for the final when we're down to the last two. So let's see who glad hands what. I know there's at least 4 or 5 who've got the relevant amount of support at the moment, and then it'll be all the deals that will start being done and all the rest of it. So they just need to get on with it, don't they? You know, they normally like a good long summer off, don't they? Really. So let's hope they get the bulk of it out of the way at least before that happens.
3 weeks to go then. Nice one. All right, guys. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and yeah, great conversations. Thanks, Alan, Adam.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone. See you later.